The next phase of roster management in December, the crazy month of December in college football, has arrived. That's Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. This is the podcast daily for Monday. Kicking it off, still about a week and a half to go until Ohio State plays in the Cotton Bowl, but we've gone through transfer portal opening. We've gone through decisions from current Ohio State players about opting in and getting a little bit of clarity, at least for that game and potentially for the 2024 roster. The next step then, the next week, belongs to Berm, the recruiting guru, and Ryan Day trying to close up, sign these guys starting on Wednesday. So, Berm, what's the primer? What's the situation for everybody who doesn't follow this and follow your work all year round? What's the vibe now that I believe the contact period closed on Sunday? So you have a couple quiet days, and then what? What happens on Wednesday?
Well, let's be clear. Quiet days doesn't mean that kids aren't talking to coaches. They're just not allowed to see them in person. So, but you can still FaceTime, which is, how's that any different? I don't know. The NCAA is stupid. What I do know is that we're talking about the next phase, but it doesn't really feel like the current phases or the previous phases have concluded anything decisively. And so it puts us in a position where Ohio State is not really being on the aggressive side of things heading into Wednesday. They're not like actively trying to flip a bunch of guys from other schools. At this point, to say it is almost fully in defense mode would maybe be an understatement, because Ohio State's top players from all over the country, anyone that's not inside of Ohio's borders that's in this class of 2024, is being relentlessly attacked by other schools. And every day it seems like the conversation is about, okay, well, if that's not enough money, how much is enough money? How much money do you need? Like, I'm going to throw a bone to you here. And serve up this old adage from American statesman and philosopher Ted DiBiase. And it's this: everyone has a price, right? So what is it? And a lot of these kids around the country are finding out in these last couple of days and in these next couple of days exactly what their price is, because these coaches that are at schools which have much more aggressive NIL stances, and by aggressive NIL stances, I mean just saying anything and knowing that it doesn't matter if they back it up, because by the time the kids are on campus, they're kind of stuck anyway. So it doesn't matter a year from now if you actually live up to your promises. Because then the kids will just transfer and they'll put a note on Twitter and say something vague. And then the people will be like, oh, what's that mean? And then 2 days later, the kid will be playing somewhere else and they'll sign with Colorado, and who cares? So like, there is no rule that prevents you from being an over the top bombastic, we're going to give you this, that, and the other thing, other than the fact that, if you don't want to be a terrible person, you shouldn't be doing that. But this is college football, which is full of terrible people. So it's happening all over the place. And it's been a rough couple of weeks for Ohio State on the recruiting trail. And it could be a rough couple of days, to be honest. But here they sit as we head into Monday, 2 days away, 48 hours from the early signing period beginning. The Buckeyes have the number 2 ranked class in the country, which is still pretty good, all things considered. Now, the question is, how many of these guys can they hold on to? How many of them are they going to lose? We fully expect them to lose Jordan Lyle, 4-star running back, to the University of Miami. That one is all but, signed and sealed and delivered, I think. I'm not sure exactly what Lyle's waiting for. By the time this hits the airways at 5 a.m. on Monday, it could actually have already happened. Who knows? But it certainly feels like that one's inevitable. And then you have the noise around Jeremiah Smith, 5-star receiver, Jeremiah McClellan, 4-star receiver from St. Louis, and now suddenly Edric Houston, 5-star defensive end from Buford, Georgia, who visited Clemson and Alabama on Friday and Saturday. And after not talking about another school or visiting another school for the last 6 months, and then all of a sudden it's last days of the contact period, last days of this signing period, and desperation comes in the form of giant green bills from a lot of people. So it's a weird time. I mean, it's hard to sugarcoat it and be positive about it, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds a lot like the conversation that we had a year ago at this time, and then one that we had later on the Wednesday of the early signing period, where you were pointing out the, cash reserve deficiencies or unwillingness or whatever, however you want to characterize Ohio State's NIL stance. And I will say that I'm still sitting here believing the same thing that I did a year ago, which is that Ohio State is probably in the right to not be just dropping bags and bags of cash and trying to get in bidding wars against, I don't know, Miami or Texas A&M or Michigan State, whoever it is. Like, I don't think that is a viable strategy. It's incredibly frustrating, and especially in your position to cover this and like watch all the conversation shift from relationships and position coaches and the normal recruiting conversation and then become about dollars and cents for some people, not everyone, by Wednesday of this week. But generally, the people who are making these decisions for the highest bidder wind up right back in the market again in the transfer portal. And that one may be the better strategy for Ohio State, is to go with these second chance recruitments and like, see, we told you the money wasn't all that it was cracked up to be.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that there are multiple levels of truth in this entire conversation. One, Ohio State's NIL situation is significantly better than it was a year ago. That's not disputable. What is disputable is whether or not the average person donating to NIL and the NIL collectives is actually enough to move the needle when it comes to competing against the University of Oregon and Nike. And or competing against the University of Georgia and Coca-Cola. Like, it's not able to move the dial against that sort of thing. And that sort of thing, which is not supposed to happen, is happening in a rampant manner. And it's hard to begrudge kids or their families. Let's just dive in. Jeremiah McClellan, the battle here as Ohio State heads into these last 48 hours is between probably Ohio State and Oregon. There's been a lot of buzz about Missouri, but it's actually Oregon that has been the constant underlying threat here. And I'm not speaking about this from a point of knowing it definitively, but if you're a young football player and Phil Knight, the owner of Nike, is directly involved in your conversations about your future college in a school that is known more for uniforms than championships, in a area of the country where, it's beautiful up there. I love the Pacific Northwest, but you're going there because you're getting Nike money. And there is not just like the immediate Nike money that comes from, this NIL stuff that is not inducement based, obviously, but there's the long-term goal of you go play for Nike. And you're going to play for Nike. You're not going to play for Oregon. And kudos to Dan Lanning and what they've done. They've got a good program. They got success. Troy Franklin, they're doing things with wide receivers. They're getting people's attention. They're going to be a problem in the Big Ten if the rest of the league doesn't catch up to what Nike's doing. But if you go play at Oregon and wear the swoosh for a couple of years, what happens when you go to the NFL? Who's paying you your multi-million-dollar endorsement deals? I mean, this is not just a one-tier system here. Like, you are joining this, and it is a pipeline to your merchandise deals for the rest of your life. And like, if you do it right. Now, it hasn't actually proven to bear out that way for anyone yet because it's still new, but like, that's the promise. And if you're a 17-year-old kid in St. Louis, how the hell do you say no to that? I don't know that. Like, I understand people being mad about it and frustrated about it, but I don't know how you say no to that. 17-year-old me wouldn't have said no to that. Like, hey, here's Nike. We're going to design your own shoe. You're going to have a sponsorship deal with Nike by the time you're a sophomore in college, because now that's legal. Like, it's not without rules. Like, this is going to happen over and over and over again. And until kids are getting the phone call from Les Wexner or someone directly associated with him, how does this change for Ohio State? That's where I get frustrated, because I don't know what the real outcome is for Ohio State, other than, as you said, standing back, waiting for 8 months, and then telling a kid, see, we told you this is what was going to happen. And you got sucked into the money and the glitz and the glamour. But you know what? Most 18-year-old kids and their families are going to be like, cool, well, guess what? We just got a ton of money.
A what? We don't. A blank ton? Oh yeah, I got you. Look, we can talk about that plenty, and we did last year, and we probably will again on Wednesday afternoon. I'm guessing, when we evaluate whatever happens over the next couple of days. But when you look at the class as it's currently constructed, Berm, is there how have they done to this point? Let's assume everything goes to the best possible outcome over the next 48 hours. What's missing right now?
More defensive line help. I mean, if the Buckeyes can hold on to Edric Houston, if they can hold on to Jeremiah McClellan, again, I'm gonna write off Jordan Lyle as a done deal. So those are the things you're worried about. Obviously, there's still a conversation about Jeremiah Smith, but we'll I don't know. I just don't know that I buy that. The question really is how did you do enough in the defensive line with the way things currently are? And the answer is no. You have a commitment from Edric Houston, who you're trying to hold on to. You have a commitment from Eric Mensah, a defensive tackle from Virginia, who's a 3-star prospect that was a flip from Virginia Tech, who had really no offers from anyone else that was going to be even close to enticing. And then you had a 5-star commitment from Justin Scott, which you lost to Miami, and have no other edge rusher, no other help. Amaris Williams, who is a player that Ohio State offered in October, who visited twice in October and November, is almost certainly going to sign with Auburn for, whatever reasons one can come up with. Carlin Jones, a defensive tackle from Bay City, Texas, who Ohio State, flipped away from Nebraska and got him to reopen his recruitment, is trending potentially to USC in the next couple of days, who visited there. This all of these conversations are going to turn inherently negative because there is this giant shining star of problems, which is how do you fix this? And when you look back at the 2023 cycle, the lack of defensive edge players, the lack of edge rushers, you're moving around Arvell Reese now on the roster to try to figure out how to balance that out. The Buckeyes are turning down official visits from like the guy from UTSA who finished second in the country in sacks because he doesn't fit the defense. And I just don't know what the fit is, but defensive.
How does he not fit the defense? Like somebody, like I don't understand that explanation.
Well, they see him as a 3-4 linebacker and they don't play a 3-4. So if that's your belief, okay. But that doesn't answer the question as to then, so what are you doing with Mitchell Melton and Arvell Reese? Because that's what you're trying to find a role for those guys. But if you're not actually playing the jack position, which is essentially a 3-4 outside linebacker, then I don't know. I don't know where you're going. I don't know how you're recruiting to that position if you're not playing that position. But I digress. That's not really here nor there. But
I think
offensive line is the spot that you look at and you go, if everything goes great between now and Wednesday, which I'm not, I know I'm coming off negative. I'm not saying that it's a done deal with Edric Houston flipping to Bama or Clemson. But I mean, you can understand why people would have a pessimistic, approach at this point, the way the defensive line recruiting went the last 2 cycles.
Well, let's loop every part of this December roster management together for this, because if we agree, which we do, that the defensive line haul efforts plan seems to be lacking and has been for several years. Ohio State, it sounds like Jack Sawyer is probably closer to a return than we would have guessed in August. That's a big deal. We don't really know exactly where JT Tuimoloau is sitting right now. He did not talk to the media last week. My understanding, and I think we share this, is that if he did not get a first-round grade back from the draft advisory board, he was also willing to return. Ohio State would be putting a lot of eggs in that basket. You still have Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry, but there's not a ton of depth at defensive end. So you have this. You have Ohio State not making it looked like they were going to be heavily involved in that portal recruitment. Now they're suddenly not. You have no clear path forward if there's continued. I can't see any other way to describe it. Miscommunication between Jim Knowles and Larry Johnson about what they should be pursuing and how they should be playing it when you get into Saturdays in games themselves. All these things are tied together. It seems untenable. There are people in the coaching profession around the country that again are saying, feels like Larry Johnson is probably ready to retire. And everyone who's followed my coverage of this for the last several years, I'm not making a prediction about that happening, because in each of the last 2 years and dating back to the Rose Bowl, the expectation was that Ohio State would either be shifting him into an emeritus role that was not full-time, getting assistance from the rules board that was going, NCAA, that was going to expand, remove the cap for having full-time countable coaches, or Option C, just that he is 70, nearing 70 years old, at 70 years. I'm not sure at this point what his actual age is, but at a retirement age. And one of those three things, none of them happened when there was a distinct, and in fact, more likely than not, possibility of that happening. So that I am not predicting that, but something has to give here, because whether that's Ryan Day to Jim Knowles, whether that's Jim Knowles to Larry Johnson, whether that's Larry Johnson all on his own, I don't know. Something is breaking down in this process. It's not just NIL that's causing this. Like
no, it's not.
I know that, and that something has to be done, because the whole thing used to be, well, Larry Johnson's reputation is going to get you in the door with all these 5 stars, and most of them are going to sign because of Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, and Chase Young. That has just flat out not been the case in the last 3 cycles.
Yeah, and primarily because the argument or conversation or rebuttal to that has been, yeah, but he's going to retire and you're not going to be there with him. And more often than not, if you hear that from 10 or 11 or 12 or 14 or 18 or 25 coaches, you're going to start to believe it. As far as what I was told by Ohio State side of things this weekend, there has not been that conversation. Larry Johnson is not out there telling kids he's retiring or anything like that, which was speculated on Saturday when the buzz about the Edric Houston visiting Bama popped up. That's not happening. So that doesn't mean he won't down the road. I don't know. But at this point, it's like, who do you believe? And if you're recruiting kids that don't believe you, like, that's a problem. If you're recruiting kids who are lying to you and their families are lying to you, that's a problem. If you're recruiting kids that tell you one thing and do another, that's a problem. So some of this is the Ohio State staff, I think, is being a touch naive in this new world of recruiting and falling back on the old things and saying, well, the relationship I have with Johnny is really good, and so Johnny would never lie to me. Bull crap, Johnny's lying to you. Or Johnny's third uncle is lying, or Johnny's recruiting coordinator at his high school is lying. Someone is subverting you. And if you're not on top of it enough to understand that, because you're not actually engaged in day-to-day conversation, or because your conversations are not really about the nitty-gritty of recruiting, and instead they're about, how's your family, which is great. But we're 48 hours away from signing day, that you can't ask how your aunt is doing. You know what I mean? Like, no one cares unless your aunt is the one that's got her hand out at this point. Then what's the point of talking to her at this juncture? Like, there is no value in that. Talk to his aunt 6 months from now. You know what I mean? Like, this is the problem that Ohio State is facing, is that Larry Johnson is on the older side. He is a man that has obviously has a long history, rich tradition of development at defensive line. He's doing a great job with that still. Ohio State is not aware entirely at this point what all of their defensive linemen are going to do in the so until you know that, or that's definitive, like, maybe it is definitive, maybe we just aren't privy to it, and maybe that's why they're being slow at defensive line. And if that's the case, I'm all for it. And I think this is the biggest problem that I'm personally trying to navigate it as far as coverage goes in the last couple of weeks, is that there seems to be a reluctance from the Ohio State side of things to be transparent with folks about what's going on. And when that happens, you're letting these narratives run wild, and it just is silly to me. Like, even Alabama, even Georgia, the teams that have, are above Ohio State in probably the hierarchy of college football, the only two that have been consistently with them in the last decade or longer, those schools are much more apparent in what they're doing and why than Ohio State is. And I don't understand the 2008 approach that's happening in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center when it comes to getting your message out there, if that makes any sense. Like, it just seems like they're very reluctant to. When Trevor Etienne hits the transfer portal 10 days ago, for example, and the minute his name is announced in the portal, there are 11 Georgia websites going, oh, this one's the one Georgia wants. Watch out, watch out. Like, how did they know that ahead of time? You know what I mean? Like,
they're just on top of the ball there, Berm. They just don't, they're so much better at their jobs than we are. Like, you just have to tip your hat to Georgia.
Right. That happens because the Ohio State staff is being extremely guarded. And I guess I get it in some ways. Like, I think that a year ago when the the mantra changed from Ohio versus the world or Ohio against the world to Woody against the world. Things have shifted dynamically, and I don't think it's doing them any favors, because on a public relations standpoint, they just seem to be standing still when everyone else is moving forward. And I just don't think that's how you operate. I mean, in this new era, like, it just seems weird to me.
I suggested that 2 weeks ago on the Cotton Bowl Sunday with the press conference from Ryan Day. I thought that was one of the lowest energy, least effective press conferences of Ryan Day's career. And one of the things, to go back to day one when he arrived, that you knew, like, all right, that guy is going to be a head coach, was the way that he could talk, the way that he could sell. He was an effective recruiter to quarterbacks and wide receivers, and he was an effective recruiter to media covering him, who could get a clear grasp of what his vision was and what he was going to do. Some of that has just vanished. That was a missed opportunity then to say, yes, that was loss number 3, but here's what we're going to do this month. And it's not just laying it out every single step, evaluating the coaching staff, evaluating the transfer portal, evaluating the roster, making competitive NIL offers to keep the current NFL draft eligible players on the roster. All these things are going to happen throughout the month. And oh, by the way, we're keeping score. We're number 2 currently in the country. Ohio State is going to have one of the best signing classes, by December 20th. And all those things, we're going to get that fixed and win the Cotton Bowl. That was not what happened. We'll evaluate. Oh, we'll think about a coaching change. We could get them on the road. No, we'll just think about that, and then do nothing. And then don't speak for the entire next week. And then you have an opportunity to get to Wednesday and sell it. And Ryan Day is currently planning on having a Zoom instead of a full-scale signing day celebration, or even a normal press conference, which has happened for every program, every Ohio State signing day that I've been a part of, and at every other program that I've ever covered, including Wyoming, which would sit there for an hour and watch film with you and tell you about the players that they signed and why people should be excited about it. Having a 30-minute Zoom on signing day for the Ohio State University is like the worst part of this entire month, and trying to re-energize Ohio State for the future, because the Woody Hayes Athletic Center is not crumbling. This program is on a really good footing. We've spent 22 minutes already talking about almost nothing but negative things. That's not the actual reality of the program, and I don't know why we should feel that way.
Yeah, and that is the biggest frustration, because there's behind the scenes, the private conversations that are happening are still very positive. There is still, okay, here's the deal. If all these guys can just get out and say it, just get out and be in front of it. And I don't understand why that hasn't been the approach. There's a post on the Ohio State.Rivals message board on Sunday, which I think puts this all into perspective pretty well, about how good Ohio State recruiting has been and has continued to be and will continue to be, even with all this stuff going on, but also B, a little perspective about how bad it could be. Because someone, Day Era 20 posted, if Jeremiah Smith, Jeremiah McClellan, Edric Houston, Jordan Lyle all flip, and Ohio State is unable to add Carlin Jones or Coy Parrish from Minnesota, 4-star safety, that will leave Ohio State at number 14 in the 247 composite team rankings. Now, that would mean right now you're at 22 commits. You'd be at 21, 20, 19, 18. You'd finish with 18 commits and still be 14th in the country after losing all of your best players. And imagine how bad it is at, let's say, Iowa, right? You'd lose all that and you still have a top 15 recruiting class. So the expectation is so high. The results have been so good, and it's so worth celebrating and so worth being positive about, that it is madness to me that the coaching staff is not out there making sure people are celebrating what they're doing. And yeah, it sucks you lost the game to Michigan for the 3rd straight time. It sucks that right now you're getting sort of, screwed in the recruiting front because of NIL and the fact that there are no limits to what people are able to do. All that being what it is, you're still in a position to sign a top 5 recruiting class for the 2nd straight year in a world where there's no reason that Ohio State should be signing a top 5 class with all of the things that they're up against. But they're doing it because they do have coaches who are extremely competent and they do have a plan that is extremely well put together behind the scenes. And you should just be stepping out in front of the media and saying, this is what we're doing and it's working. And it may not be something that's going to, move the dial every day, but trust us, we have a plan. Like I just don't, and this is sort of devolved into just a rant episode, I guess, but there are plenty of good things going on in the program. And it's just bizarre to me that it's everything is viewed so negatively, and it starts to seep into what we have to say, because there is no way around it. There's no other conversation to be had. Like, get the coaches out there. Let's talk about these guys. If Jeremiah Smith signs with Ohio State on Wednesday, we should be sitting, as you just said, in a room with Brian Hartline, and Brian Hartline should be breaking down that film for people and saying, this is why he's the best wide receiver prospect to come out of high school football in the last 20 years. Instead, we're not going to even be in the building. Like, why is Fox Sports not going to be in the building? They're going to be in Boulder, Colorado, or they're going to be in Eugene, Oregon, pumping up the brands that are going to be playing on Fox and all these other things for the next 10 years, and not at Ohio State for the first time on signing day in how long? Like, what is the end goal of that? Where does that go? And it's not our job to be PR for people, but like, that's what media in a lot of ways has become. Look at Alabama's coverage. Look at Georgia's coverage. They have shifted it entirely in the last few years. It's obvious.
Well, I mean, whether you're providing PR or not, which is not what we're paid to do, we understand how it works, the value of coverage, like whether it's good, bad, whatever. And that's why I've been so skeptical about the way that the last 2.5 weeks have worked from, Ryan Day's perspective in terms of selling his program again to the public. Like, I understand that in the Woody, with his coaches, with the roster, with the recruits that he's been in the living room, that direct communication is the most important. But the overall value to the brand, both the brand of Ryan Day and the brand of Ohio State, requires the head coach to constantly be selling to the public. And if you're talking about, again, we can encompass this into an everything conversation. If you want people giving to NIL, if you want to continue having a wait list for season tickets, if you want them paying hundreds of dollars to be in the horseshoe, if you want full belief and to have not people questioning whether you're fit to lead the program after 3 straight losses to Michigan, that's just part of the job. We've said this before. Like, hey, it stinks, man. He may be stretched too thin. He might have to give up play calling or do less with the quarterbacks because the job has changed. That part is not different. Urban Meyer may not have liked doing media. He understood the value of doing it. Jim Tressel may not have been the most exhilarating press conference subject of it that anyone ever had, but he knew the right way to sell himself and the brand. And if he needed to go out at a basketball game and take the mic and get people riled up, he could do that too. I mean, this is just, it's not new that part is included in the job description. So I think that part, I'm sorry that we're ranting about inside baseball stuff and the way that the coverage of the team works, but I think that all these things that we're just circling around are tied together, and every week is part of that. Transfer portal plans, NFL decisions, the excitement. Last week on a Tuesday, that was a pretty good day for the program. 9 guys saying that they're opting in, and the potential for them to be NFL, turn down the NFL and come back for one more year. We'll see. They could have done that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Be like, hey, it's your turn. Let's make an announcement. Let's have another press conference. Because guess what? That's our job. We'll show up at any time. So whether we're covering it with a PR slant or not, you have the opportunities and you make the most of them, because then you benefit from the coverage no matter what people say. There's no bad way to spin Jack Sawyer saying that he wants to play in the Cotton Bowl and it's important. They could have done that story every single day last week, and they did not. And those are the opportunities that I feel like are being missed that should not be. They're layups. It's a slam dunk. Go do it. Ohio State is not broken. And not everyone needs a reminder of that. And I'm not trying to preach to those people who can recognize that fact anyway, or preach to anyone at all. But I some of these things have to be more closely evaluated for the missed opportunities they are.
Yeah, because it doesn't matter how good the private conversations you are, if when you leave a recruit's living room, they go on social media and see all of just the barrage of questions and negativity. That weighs just as heavy as the conversation, and in some cases more heavily, because that's what they're seeing and being inundated with. So if you're not willing to step up and find ways to change that public narrative, then it becomes hard to understand where things are going moving forward. You're 10 days away from playing in a New Year's Six bowl against a top 10 SEC opponent. You got all these guys coming back. You're 3 days away from signing a top 5 recruiting class in the country. You've got a very real chance that Travion Henderson and JT Tuimoloau and Emeka Ibuka and Jack Sawyer and Lathan Ransom and Denzel Burke, that all these guys are saying, we're actually coming back for another year of football here because we love Ohio State. And to just jump into that and say, we may not be quite as aggressive in the transfer portal as as people want us to be, but that's because we have a plan, instead of just disappearing for 3 weeks. I just don't get it.
All right. Well, if you made it
anyway, we'll talk more about recruiting. We're going to talk way more about recruiting over the next couple of days. I'm positive about that. There is plenty of good news. Aaron Noland is signing with Ohio State on Wednesday. He's going to be one of the better, recruits in the country. He's a top 5 quarterback. You've got really good players from Ohio. You got awesome cornerbacks in Bryce West and Aaron Scott. You've got really good, gritty linebackers that people are going to love, and Peyton Pierce and Garrett Stover. You've got 4 offensive linemen who are really athletic and talented and very good players. Maybe they don't have the 5-star tackle, moniker that people want attached to them, but they're really good players. Like, there's really good things. You've got dynamic athletes in Max LeBlanc and Damarion Witten at tight end. You've got, Jeremiah Smith, the best receiver recruit, statistically ever, according to the rankings. You got another 5-star in Mylan Graham. Jeremiah McClellan, that's not over just because they're fighting Oregon. Doesn't mean it's a done deal. Like, Ohio State's not going to walk away from that until they know it's not going in their direction. They won't know that till Wednesday, because they're going to believe in what they do. They do believe in what they do. So let everyone else see it. Let people in. That's all. That's all I can say.
All right. Well, the last full work week for many folks out there before the holiday season ramps up again. Hopefully we didn't start it on too poor of a note for you, but if we did, again, we're really sorry about that. But
I love you all. I'm tired. I'm just tired, Austin. I'm tired.
I know you are.
And I'm just cranky. I'm cranky, and I just want positive things. Damn it.
All right. Well, one of them will be, you can have some mac and cheese bites later on today, Monday, when we get back into the Horseshoe Lounge at Roosters for the live show. So you can look forward to that. And maybe that'll turn around some of our mood as we get another week closer to the Cotton Bowl and a couple days away from the start of the early signing period. So Berm's time to shine. Thanks for joining us on the podcast daily. And hey, we're sorry, but we'll do better next time. See ya.